Welcome and thank you for attending this session of Lexbe's eDiscovery webinar series, 10 Best Practices, Forms of Production, presented by Lexbe Principal Gene Albert. My name is Stu Van Dusen and I'm the Marketing Manager here at Lexbe. Our eDiscovery webinar series takes place once a month and we cover a wide variety of relevant issues related to litigation technology and legal data management. Today's webinar should last about 30 minutes and we'll have a URL to access a recorded version of the presentation available for anyone who registered later this week. To give you a brief overview of our focus here at Lexbe, we develop technology that helps legal professionals meet discovery deadlines without sacrificing quality. We do this through our fast, high-capacity document conversion and processing services, as well as our full-featured review platform, Lexbe eDiscovery Suites, which includes self-serve processing and conversion functionality with the ability to self-upload up to 10 gigabytes of case data per day. If during our webinar there are any questions that you have or any technical issues being experienced, please email me at webinars@lexbe.com. We'll answer all the questions we can at the end, but if we run out of time, we'll be sure to follow up with you via email. Before I turn things over, let me tell you a bit about Gene. As mentioned, Gene is a principal and co-founder at Lexbe. He's worked as in-house counsel as well as in private practice. Gene also has experience leading ventures in medical services, software, and web-based businesses. Gene received his JD from SMU and his MBA from the University of Texas at Austin. With that, here's Gene with 10 Best Practices, Forms of Production.
All right, thank you, Stu. Thank you, everybody, for attending today. This is a more of a technical subject than some of the other ones that we do, but it's a very important one, and it's one where we see a lot of traps for the unwary, particularly at the beginning of a case. So we're going to run through all those and talk about what we think are best practices. So you can see on the agenda screen here the 10 best practices we're going to go through. This is a lot of material in this webinar for a half an hour, so we'll go through some of these slides pretty quickly. And if you have some questions about them or we didn't get enough detail, we'll be posting the slide deck and also the webinar. And additionally, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me or anybody here at Lexbe. Thanks. And first one is to know your rules and your options. So under the federal rules, this is governed by Federal Rule Procedure 34B, and there can be an agreement on the forms of production, and if that's done and that's agreement's clear, that there's not a problem with that. If there's no agreement, 34B provides that the electronic stored information, or ESI, needs to be provided in a form that is ordinarily maintained or a form that is reasonably usable. This certainly was intended to include native files, as in Word, Excel, the way things are maintained on the system, and might be other forms as well. And there's some case law about that. If there's if there hasn't been an agreement, then the requesting party can make a specific request, and if there's no timely objection, then the receiving party will be bound. So it's important if you receive a request to understand what that is and make sure that you object if you have a problem with it. And if there's a specific request with a objection, then the objecting party can specify a different form, and then the producing party can object or accept that. So that's the basic mechanism of how those rules work. There are going to be state laws that are similar to 34B in most. Also, there'll be particular local rules sometimes in a particular type of courts and particular jurisdictions. The next best practice is to match your review approach with your request, and there are several different ways that one can do document review. That depends on the size of the case, the capacities of the experience of the people doing the reviews, and also the software that you have. And we see these out today. One of them, the first one, is having a dedicated litigation review application. And this is a special purpose software that's designed to organize search code and produce large data sets, although it can be used on small ones as well, and is. These often, depending on the software, can require a specific type of form of production. So some of the older ones require TIFF with the load files. Some work with PDFs and natives. Some you can put natives in and they'll process in the system. Other ones have to be pre-processed into a TIFF or a PDF for them to be loaded. So there's a number of different options here. The second thing we see is sometimes with small review sets, firms will review email directly in Outlook, and native files will be reviewed on a local computer. This can work okay if it's pretty small, but breaks down if it's very large. Some like reviewing in PDF. The advantage with that is that you can, without a litigation review application, that you can bait stamp or control number and review on your computer. And the important thing here is not particularly what software or approach somebody's using, but just that you're requesting the files in the proper format that you can use. Three, we're going to talk about knowing the different forms of production. And this is a little bit more detail of the pluses and minuses of the different ways that one can do production and types. So the natives are the first one, and these are original application, Word, Excel, etc. The advantage of this is that this is the best approximation of what the custodian saw and used, and got minimal size expansion and all the metadata available. Disadvantage is that you need a local application to review all the file types, and your reviewing attorneys can be spending a lot of time trying to go through software issues that can be very expensive. And there's also no paginated equivalence as in a PDF or a TIFF. And often some processing will still be needed to pull the files apart, and the files will be, zip files need to be expanded, PSTs, which contain Outlook email, need to be expanded into component parts, and often attachments will be taken apart. So issues with that. And also reviewing just in native increases privilege issues on being able to pull files back. Second type is what we call near natives, and this is there's been files where there's been some intermediate conversion from the original file type into another native file type, and this is referring to mainly databases. So if you have a large database of accounting data or other types, nobody really wants to review that in its native application, and reports will be run, queries will be run, and this will be pulled out into Excel or other formats, and then they might be reviewed that way. This is relatively expensive because it's specialized in one-off and often done by specialists or experts when needed. Third type that some systems use is rendered HTML, and this is taking native files and making a HTML version of them, and this is specific to some software. It can give a rough approximation of the document. It can't be bait stamped, but it is often can be prepared for you faster and much less file expansion than TIFFs, which is one of the other alternatives. PDF is increasingly popular, and it's popular because we just see it so many other places, and filings are done that way. It has a number of advantages, that it's familiar, easy to use, does not require a review platform, all those page level bait stamping, and retains color as opposed to TIFFs, which often don't. Disadvantage is that some review platforms don't support it well, and that it's a complex format that can present corruption issues downstream in review, and those can be difficult to deal with at that point. So it has to be, if one works with PDFs, to make some effort to make sure that they're done properly and prepared properly, or you can have issues downstream. There's actually a number of different types of PDFs out there that all look the same to the end user, which is really the beauty of what Adobe did in creating the PDF format. And there's four types as we categorize them. One is text-based, and these are ones that have been converted from a native file. Second one are image-based, when they've been scanned, and the image, there's an image only, and those aren't searchable by themselves. Then there's text under image, and these are ones that start with image, and then OCR has been added as a text layer within the file. And then a fourth is an Acrobat portfolio type, and this is a compound file type where a number of different PDF documents have been joined into one large PDF document, and these generally must be have to be extracted back out to be reviewed properly. And the next type is text and TIFF. TIFF is an image type file like a picture of a document, and this is a traditional review format that goes back, predates PDF actually, and goes back to the 90s or before, and it's really the best for some review platforms. And it's typically done single paged, and there'll be a separate text file that'll either be extracted text or OCR. The advantages of it is it's very robust. You don't have the corruption issues that you can have in PDF. The ability to need specific applications that you have in TIFFs, and is required for many platforms. Disadvantages are that it's cumbersome in that it requires separate text files and load files to use, and it requires a review platform to pull it together. You can't easily look at these on their own. And there's also substantial file expansion from natives and some PDFs depending on how they're captured. So it can be 3 to 5 times larger for hosting than other types. And they can, and the traditional TIFF format loses color and may lose hidden and other data as part of print driver captures. So and there's ways to work around those in the systems with some of them, but that often is an issue. And to bring these together, you have to have a load file for that to work properly. And the last type of production here is called blended productions, and this is where you would deliver in multiple formats. And we recommend these just as a matter of efficiency when the production is being done. This can be done without additional cost now with computers, and they'll be and the natives, PDFs, TIFFs will all be, if needed, will all be prepared, and along with multiple versions of load files, so you don't get caught up in some of the forms of production disputes and such that we might otherwise have, and you have a lot of different options for different people to look at versions of the files, particularly the PDFs can be pulled out, preparing for depositions, and et cetera later. Let me talk a little bit more about the load files because those are really central to much of forms of production. And these are structured text or sometimes database type files that reference the document files in the review set, produce set, and also associated metadata. And they're primarily for use in litigation review database systems, although you can get data out of them otherwise as well. And they include, or can include, a number of different things. They reference the documents and email metadata. They show the document breaks for single-page TIFFs, and these are really important because otherwise you just have a bunch of pages and you don't have the documents organized as documents, which you need for efficient review. Email family associations, attachments to emails can be kept in the load file, and they'll sometimes map to multiple versions of the file if the review system supports it. So you could have, TIFF text, native versions, or PDF. There's a number of general formats in use, and you'll see them with extensions DAT for concordance, ringtail relativity, and others, DII for summation, LFP for iPro, and then an Excel XLSX for Lexbe. And in the next one, we've got some examples. You can just see how these work. So what we're seeing here on this slide is up at the top is an email, and you can see there's a date, May 26, 2000, 10:19 a.m. From somebody named Lavorato. And if you look down in the Excel version of the load file, you can see the Bates number in column A. You can see the down in column K is the sender. The date and time is in G and H. So this data has been extracted out of the email and then put in the load file and this goes into the litigation database. And the next file is another version of that same data, and this is the DAP format, and highlighted some of that same data there, so you can see how it's harder to read when you pull this up than the Excel version, but it's the same data. And they use different, it's called delimiters. And then the next one is a DII file, which is used by the summation database, and they've got another way of working with it, what they call tokens, and you can see those showing the same information. And on the right, it shows the association of all the different pages going 5, 6, 7, 8 that go back to one of the records. So that's how that works. The next best practice is to use the meet and confer conference to your advantage. Federal Civil Procedure 26 requires that the parties meet and confer 21 days before the scheduling conference, and the scheduling conference must occur within 120 days of filing of the suit. So that can happen fairly quickly, and there's a number of things that can or be done in the meet and confer and pursuant to the rules, and this can be discussing ESI preservation, developing a discovery plan, submitting to the court a report. And the underlying idea of Rule 26 in the meet and confer is that it assumes and requires collaboration and good faith in the parties. How helpful are these? It depends. They can resolve a lot of matters, or they can be a total waste of time, and that really depends on the preparation and attitudes of the parties. What can one do before the conference? Well, identifying custodians that are going to be implicated in the production and your opponents is important. Mapping out the ESI in gigabytes that you expect to produce, and what you might think you're going to get is helpful to know and talk about. Being ready to discuss any ESI that's not reasonably accessible. Keyword searches to discuss those and agree with those if possible if that's being used. And knowing what form of production that you prefer and load file requirements. At the conference, they're often going to be a good idea to have a technical representative from your client or an eDiscovery vendor available to discuss particularities if the attorney is not into the details of that much. And to know what kind of document review platform and approach you and your opponent are going to be using, and what form of production will be requested. After the conference, any agreements, there should be memorials in agreed order, and disagreements should be documented. Tips here are, one is to know what you're agreeing to. Some of the traps we see is people sometimes agreeing to something early on when they just don't understand the technicality of it, and that causes problems later. Watch time commitments. Sometimes these ESI issues and technical issues can take a lot of time, more time than you think. So if you've committed to something and you try to have a good understanding that you can really do it. Native productions are requested a lot, but they can really increase the time of review and privilege review in particular. And any metadata production should be understood what's being done, and make sure that there's not confidential or privileged information being given. The fifth best practices are related to request specific file types and metadata as needed. So there's TIFF or PDF if that's what one wants, a paginated review, which is most common. Load files should be spec'd out and know exactly what you want for your load file, and that should include metadata that you're planning on using in the case and need, and this usually a minimum is going to include email, date, time, sender, subject. Increasingly commonly requested and provided, and some of the applications can take those input directly and convert them. Other ones can bring them in and associate them back with your PDFs or your TIFFs, and that all needs to be done properly in the request for production and the load files that come in. Six is tracking custodians and handling deduplication. Specifically identifying files and ESI to custodians is increasingly being requested and required by courts, and they can be associated with the incoming natives or with load files. And the custodian association is also needed for chain of custody and admissibility as one gets to trial. And This can be complicated in the sense that often you do not know who the custodians are earlier on when you're doing the gathering of the ESI that's going to go into a review application. So you might over-collect on some custodians, or a custodian may be dropped out later. So there's often some of a moving target. Deduplication refers to emails and other files that are exact duplicates of each other, and they can be deleted or filtered from the review set. There's a couple approaches on this. One is to do it only within a custodian, and that's called vertical deduplication. And another one is to do it across custodians, which is horizontal deduplication. And it's good to get duplicates out, or at least identify them, for being able to have a more efficient review and a more consistent and quality review. But deduplicating between custodians can raise a number of complications, particularly if custodians come and go in what's being produced. Next, practice 7 is to understand placeholders, databases, and other file types. There are, as part of the production in a paginated form, TIFF or PDF, some files are always going to be not going to be able to be converted, and this can because they're corrupted, they're password protected, they're unusual file types, and other reasons. These files will be produced with a placeholder file noting the unconverted file and the bait stamp, and that allows bait stamping of a page. Then the native files can be examined as needed, and this is common practice. Databases and other unstructured files raise similar issues. They're usually not produced natively. Instead, reports, if needed, these should be spec'd and run to meet whatever for the production, and then intermediate versions of the reports can be saved in Excel or can be converted to PDF or TIFF or both. And then there will often be unusual, in some cases there'll be unusual file types or applications, and they will often just be examined separately by an expert if needed. Best practice 8 refers to comprehensive discovery orders. In large, complex, or multi-party litigation, often a comprehensive discovery order is appropriate, and often special masters might be involved to handle disputes. And a number of things of these that a comprehensive discovery order can cover. It can have a default or general format of production, how emails handled, metadata, how databases are handled, if there are going to be documents scanned, hard copies, and there can be scanning specifications, how dupes are going to be handled, Bates numbering protocols, how search terms, if those are used as part of the review, are going to be disclosed, and how to handle disagreements over search terms, if predictive coding or any other technology-assisted review is utilized, how that's to be done, how and when privilege logs are going to be delivered, cost of production, any cost shifting. There's included in here an example of one out of the Deepwater Horizon litigation, and a link to it that's on the internet, so you can see how a complex order is done if that's ever appropriate for one of your cases. Best practice 9 is to watch out for redaction traps. Privilege and sensitive information may be redacted prior to a production, and this can create some complications when you have large data sets and computers. If native documents are produced, then the original natives should be withheld, as they cannot be directly redacted. And the system that you're using should have ability to do that. If redaction is done on a TIFF or another image file or a PDF converted version, then the text has to be re-OCR'd to make sure that the redacted or privileged information isn't included. So for TIFFs, that are usually separate text files that need to be re-OCR'd. For PDFs, there's text layers that need to be re-OCR'd, and that should be checked to make sure that's being done properly. The natives, including the redacted data, should be withheld. And what's more complicated is container files. need also to be with redacted data should be withheld. And container files are files that would include a native file. So these will be a zip file, MSGs and emails. This can be complicated because sometimes these can go several layers deep in nesting. So an email that wouldn't otherwise be privileged could include a privileged information as an attachment or as an embedded file. So some quality control needs to be done to make sure this is being done properly when you do a review. And sometimes there's errors, important errors in cases when privileged information is let out when people didn't understand these issues. And here's an example of how a redaction editor might work and allows one to see the different versions of the information, how it would look in the original or a PDF or a TIFF, along with the redacted version. And the last best practice 10 refers to near dupe identification, and that being helpful for more accuracy in your productions. This allows you to group documents are similar but not exact duplicates. And this could be an email where somebody answers it, but it's substantially the same, or versions of documents that drafts of documents, that sort of thing. Near dupe grouping is very helpful in reviews, but it's very, very processing intensive to get the groupings. There's a number of great uses for it. One of them is to group similar documents together to allow mass tagging to speed review. So often there could be a number of documents that are very close, and that a cursory review could be done of the documents once you've looked at a few of them to see they're all close enough, and they can be mass coded in the system for responsiveness, privilege, or other issue coding. There's a second related use of it is to help find more privileged documents to reduce the potential for inadvertent release of privileged information. When one does a review, whoever's doing the review is finding privileged documents, and before the production is done with near dupe groupings, one can go back and find other documents that are similar to the privileged documents and check to see if they're privileged as well. And that can greatly reduce the potential for sending out privileged information. And there's a number of cases where people, it's fairly common to where in large data sets, somebody might go through and review privileged information, and there might be 20 versions of a document, and 18 of them might be kept back, but 20 of them released because somebody missed them. That could be close versions. This allows to more tools to be able to catch that sort of thing. And one can, of course, get a clawback agreement to bring privileged information back in. That's allowed by the federal rules, but you can't put the horse back in the barn after you let it out, as they say. So it's important to catch these things on the front end, and this can be a tool for that. And the last use of it is just to find similar versions of key documents. If somebody's going through a review and finds a hot document or a key document, you can go back and find other versions quickly of that document and be able to follow that out and to get other information that's important to the case. I think we are at our time, so I will hand this back to Stu. I think we don't have time for questions right now, but perhaps we can follow up with those later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gene. We are just running out of time here. We do have some unanswered questions. We're going to go ahead and follow up with those through email. If any other questions come up, please feel free to contact us at any of the addresses or emails that you see on your screen right now. Thank you all very much for attending today's webinar. Definitely keep an eye out for next month's episode, which will be using near dupe groupings for faster and more accurate reviews. Thank you very much for attending, and have a great day. Bye.